Hey guys, Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. It is Sunday, April 23rd, 2017. Just after, it's 8:35 p.m. Today, I did a podcast with Celeste Zazzali. Anybody who has listened to this podcast since early on knows the story of Celeste. We're around the time of National Infertility Awareness Week, and Celeste so bravely told her story. Couldn't believe when I looked back on her first episode, which was 3 years ago, which would be 2014. So April in 2014, she told the story of her infertility struggles. And then 2 years later, which was last year in 2016, she told the story of actually having a positive pregnancy and the unfortunate story of losing what turned out to be twins and having to give birth, actually, as they call it, stillbirth. And it was a very emotional story, very sad story. But it's shocking because we're just 1 year later to the day of that podcast, and she was able to come on today and tell the story of what is termed her rainbow baby. She had a baby February 1st of this year, Annarose. It's just a great story. The miracle of life never ceases to amaze you when it happens. And so she came on to kind of put a bow on this story, a positive bow. And interestingly enough, anybody who is a parent, especially of a newborn, knows that you can't really plan your time accordingly. And so she had come downstairs. We were all set to do the podcast, and her daughter woke up upstairs, and her husband John opened the door before we started and said, "She needs you. She's hungry. She's crying." So Celeste promptly went up and did her motherly duties, and John ended up coming down. And so the first 25 to 30 minutes of this episode is actually with John. So it ended up being a really interesting aspect to that. I felt like I was a therapist where I had John first, then I had the two of them together for a couple moments, and then we ended up with Celeste. So it's really, I think, interesting to hear all sides of this, especially for those who have heard this story from the beginning, from back in 2014 on to 2016, and now we end it with the trilogy. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode with first John Zazzali and then Celeste Zazzali. We're here with John Zazzali, who is the husband of Celeste Zazzali, who's been on this podcast 2 times and is here for a 3rd time to have some really good news on a podcast, especially in relation to what happened on the last 2. It's all an evolution, and I guess we'll get to that story. But John, you're here because... Well, I guess we should break the story out because this is why Celeste isn't here at the moment.
Yeah, because she's feeding the baby right now.
You have a baby.
Yes. On February 1st, Annarose was brought into the world, and we're very excited. We're very thankful, we had many trials and tribulations leading up to it in order to get to this point, but we're very happy and excited.
And what was your feeling during this pregnancy? I mean, it's, as any man who is not holding babies, so it's a different role, but with what you'd been through when you got to this one, were you kind of on pins and needles the whole time?
Oh, absolutely. I was horrified for the first trimester, just waiting for something bad to happen. I teach at J.P. Stevens High School, as many people already know, for 14 years, and every day starts out with conducting my symphonic band first period. Goes from 7:50 in the morning to 8:30. And typically I don't ever receive any messages, phone calls, anything like that. First time in, I would say, maybe 12, 13 years, I got a phone call from Celeste, with some bad news. And it's traumatizing when you get bad news about, losing a child. So I think through this pregnancy, every morning I'd have the phone on, sitting on the stand, and like afraid that I was going to get a phone call, because she normally would know better in the past. Don't bother John while he's conducting. That's one of the prime time.
It's got to be really, really something to break that, right? It's like an emergency. I remember one time when I was at work, and it was early when our son Liam was born, and Melanie was at home with him for the first couple of months, as most mothers are, or actually as all mothers are, right? And I was in a meeting, and she knew not really to call at certain times.
Right.
And then she was apparently calling. I didn't pick it up, and then she called the front desk at our office, and then someone said, "Your wife's on," and I'm like, "Oh God, what's going on?" And it was really scary. She had dropped him, and he was only a couple months old. She was walking around the kitchen, and you have the dishwashing machine, and often it's closed, open, you don't know, right?
Sure.
If you have it open, you're working on it. You have a baby, maybe you're working on it, and then you got to go get the baby. You don't remember, you're tired, and she tripped over the open dishwasher.
Oh no.
And lost him, and he went forward and hit the cabinets, and then she's fearful the whole time, thinking in her head of what didn't happen, which was, you think of when you have all the utensils and they're all sticking up, right? It's the scariest thought. And so she had broken through to call me. I was real afraid. It turned out he was okay. They're resilient suckers. When she called the doctor, They said, "Well, are they okay?" But it's that kind of thing, right? When it breaks through, your normal.
At your normal routine, there's certain times when you expect a phone call, or, you check for a text message, and you can respond during a down moment. But that's just one of those weird psyche traumatizing things I guess everyone experiences in life at some point. And I think that, like I was saying before, the first trimester was terrifying for that reason, that I just kept expecting the worst, even though I was always hoping for the best, of course. And, we would go to church virtually every Sunday and pray and, hope for the best. But I still just had doubt. It just seemed like it wasn't meant in the cards for us for so long. And then when we got into the second trimester, my first happy experience, I would say, was when we went to our early anatomy scan at week 16, and we got nothing but good news from the doctor. That was amazing.
It almost becomes shocking, right?
Yeah, it wasn't expected, to be honest. I was waiting for the doctor to find something, because I learned quickly from the last experience with a pregnancy that the person doing the anatomy scan, they're usually very quiet, regardless of if they see anything or not. But you could tell they're looking for all the right things, and if there's something wrong, they're going to bring in another doctor into the room, and you usually have to wait the whole hour. And
you want info.
Yeah.
And they're being like, we want to make sure.
I'm the kind of person that I need constant reassurance every 5 seconds. So when they're looking at one thing and then moving to the next, I almost need the person to say, "Oh, okay, looks good. What's next? Oh, okay, that looks good. Yeah, I see the liver, looks good." But instead, they're just quiet and they don't say anything. So they're looking at one thing and then the next thing, and I'm like, "Well, was that one good? Was that one good?" So every 5 minutes or so, I would have to jump in and say, "How are we doing so far?"
How are we doing so far? It's like a car.
Yeah, please let me know. Keep me updated here. Don't make me wait an hour. Celeste is just sitting there quietly, and all these thoughts are going through my head. But it was unbelievable that we went through the whole anatomy scan, and the news about the baby looking great to this point was very reassuring. And this is weird too. I was in the middle of band camp at my high school at the time. It was August 25th. I can still remember the day because it was a Thursday. It was in the afternoon. And that evening we were going back to learn more drill. Our band camp goes 8 to 2 every day and then 5 to 9 at night. So we were going back to learn some drill that night.
It's like football, 2 days, but for band.
2 days for band. Yep. And we went back at 5 o'clock. So I was able to get back in time to start working on drill with the kids. And it was just a total coincidence that this worked out. But we were learning in our ballad a drill set. It was from The Wizard of Oz, and we were doing the song, Over the Rainbow, And this particular moment in the show, we hit a drill set where there's like a straight line across the field, kind of a little curvy, and then a heart is formed on the side one, which is the left side of the field from the audience perspective. And we were learning, that whole drill set where they have to form the heart. And I'm up on this big scissor lift watching them as they form this really cool picture. And I just had to explain to everybody what that moment meant to me on that particular day, how all of life came together at that very moment. How, we find out this great news early in the day that the baby's heart looked perfect.
Yeah.
And it was everything but perfect for the last pregnancy. There was
constant.
There was heart malformation, which created other abnormalities throughout the body of Rosa. So when we learned that the heart looked good at week 16, it was so reassuring. And then to be learning the drill and seeing this beautiful picture of a heart on the field, and this one color guard member holds up an actual, heart prop that we made, and she holds it up at this very beautiful moment of the music, big hit, climatic spot. And I don't know, it's just one of those overwhelming moments in my life, I would say. So it was exciting though at the same time.
So you're a serious guy at work, but you're also a fun-loving, gregarious, sociable guy.
Yeah, oh yeah. And yes.
What did the process through the whole ordeal? Because Celeste has been on through all the levels of this.
Okay.
Going from the kind of finding out about infertility, working through that, then actually having getting to the pregnancy, and that leading to the end it did, and then having what they call the rainbow baby. Mm-hmm. How did that whole process affect your kind of base personality? I mean, did it bring some fatalism or any negativity to it that you hadn't had before? Was it hard to keep buoyant?
No. I'd actually, going to work every day helps me. I guess that's kind of like my therapy. And teaching high school students music and having the privilege of conducting some wonderful musicians, it allows me to almost not forget about what's going on in my life at home, but it's definitely a distraction. Yeah. It's a distraction from what was happening. But yeah, I would say that it was very therapeutic through all those years, especially the year and a half leading up to Rosa, and then going through the pregnancy with Rosa, and then the aftermath of Rosa. So that was rough, but I would say that I got through it okay.
Well, it's such invasive information, right? I mean, in most cases, when people are having babies, it's in bedrooms, it's quiet until the point where people want to make an announcement. It comes out, the Facebook post, all this.
Yes.
But when it gets to this, you need to tell people, because it literally is affecting your life, and it could affect things where people need to make accommodations for you and all that. And I feel like especially for the guy's point of view, it's hard because you want to be like a, Clint Eastwood, James Dean, tough stoic type.
But ultimately we're not. we all want to be that. But I have a feeling if you ask Clint Eastwood, if he's ever had a moment in his life where he broke down, I'm sure he could share with you at least one instance. I think we're all meant to go through trials in our life that are going to be tough, and we're going to get through them. But, that saying, if time heals all wounds, it's kind of true.
Well, it was probably very important for obvious reasons to have a baby, and you have a baby now, right? I mean, that's the obvious ending piece to this.
Yes.
And you probably, I have to assume, even when you're cautiously optimistic, it's happening, you're getting good information, but going through what you went through, when you get to the point, you're you're so afraid because it's like things bigger than us. It's like God. It's like all these things where it's so much bigger than us.
It's completely out of your control when you're going through that waiting period of having a child.
But you make it your fault, you know? Like, that's the hard part.
Yes.
It's out of your control, but it's your fault. Even though it's not.
And you feel like, well, maybe if I made this decision sooner, or if we tried this instead. Like, I was being a typical male trying to solve the problem. Find a solution. How could we fix this? How could Rosa get through her problems and be born and be okay? So, the doctor tells you, well, when she is born, we're going to first give her an open heart surgery, and we're going to fix the heart. And then when we're done fixing the heart, then we're going to go in and fix all the area around her intestines and get everything reorganized and straighten that all out, because the disease she had, cloaca, is just something no one has ever heard of.
Yeah.
What is cloaca? Well, Google it. That's all I can say.
Isn't that the amazing thing about like Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania CHOP though? They've heard of all these. They've done all of the procedures for these things. And so there's some assurance there, but it's also just like, well, that's why this feels heavy.
Well, that's why I was kind of like, I guess, positive throughout the whole process, because I thought, all right, well, if anybody can fix this, they can. So I was hopeful, she'd be born and we'd be able to go through all those things. And I guess now looking back, a year and a half later, actually it'll be 2 years this May. Whoa, that time went by real fast. Now looking back, I think about like, what quality of life would she have had? Would she have been, a kid with a normal life, or would she have been handicapped? Would she have been someone that's always on some sort of device keeping her going? Or you just never know what it would have been like. And I know for sure, the doctors were saying you would have had to spend 6 months to a year after she was born at the hospital. That alone would have been a major, major... Basically
living in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, that would have been a major change to our lives. I was saying to Celeste, we probably would have had to sell our house, because there's no way we could maintain that home on just one of us working for that long a period of time. And it just would have changed everything. And it just wasn't in the cards for us to go through that process. So, I mean, we're very, very happy now that things 2 years later are where they are.
So when you get to the point, you're going to the hospital, baby's coming.
Yeah.
Do you almost feel, did you watch the show Lost?
I only know about the plane crash and how he wakes up at the end and he realizes. Do you almost feel like
you're living someone else's life at that point after all you'd been through? Like, oh my gosh, are we really going to the hospital? Is this a dream? Is this made up?
It all seemed surreal. When the baby was born, I mean, I lost it completely. So did Celeste. I mean, obviously. And
you hear the cry. That must have been the moment where you're just like, oh my God.
Completely lost it. They let you cut the umbilical cord. And
you don't want to lose it. You're like holding it, right? You're like...
No, not me. I don't even care. I gave up on holding it in after Rosa. I'll never forget, when she was stillborn, every time a family member would walk into the room to tell them how sorry they were for us, I would just lose it completely. So I think I kind of stopped holding it in after that experience. Crying doesn't... When I was a kid growing up, right. I'm sure most guys can attest to this. Growing up as a boy, you hold it in no matter what. If that means you wait till you get home from school, and then when nobody's looking, you go into the basement and you let it out. You just don't cry in front of other people.
Well, when you're a kid as a guy, most of that is not emotionally invested. It's physical. It's like somebody's bullying you. Somebody's like, there's not a lot of moments, although you had some emotional things growing up, but like a lot of it is like immediate. Like this, I'm crying because I was bullied, because this friend's gone, because this girl doesn't like me. Like it's not these, like the emotion that comes out of a child being born or going through what you did with Rosa is like, it's the kind that for me, I don't know if this happens to you, I don't want to hold it in, and I don't try to, but I subconsciously do. And what happens for me, and this is a disaster when you're married, I laugh. I get so overwhelmed that I feel like I'm having a panic attack, and I just start laughing. So I'll be in an argument with Melanie, and I start laughing. I mean, not that I'm trying to cry or anything,
Sure.
but there's moments, and there's weird TV shows sometimes that'll do this. Like, for some strange reason, Grey's Anatomy, there's some moments where they're in a hospital, like the apex of the episode's coming, someone dies, someone lives, and it's like, it just, physiology, whatever physiology, it just happens, and like you're sitting there and you're just like,
Yeah,
you just start laughing. And I think that, I remember when Liam was born, it's like, I remember Bill Burr, the comedian.
Sure.
So he just had a baby for the first time, and he's like in his mid to late 40s. And so he was saying, it's crazy when you have the baby because you feel like you're the only person in the world this is happening to. It's the most absurd thing you've ever witnessed or gone through. And the only thing that gets you through it is that you think of all the other schmucks who had babies too. So you go, well, I guess this is it. I'll move on. But when you're in that room and the baby is coming, or you're seeing your wife in a state of mind or physicality that you've never, like, I feel like your respect grows immensely, and I respect my wife a lot, but when you see what they're going through, you're going side to side helping them, and you're like, I could never do this. They're a champ right here. And then when it happens, like the whole emotion of it, you hear the baby cry, you see the baby, it's almost like a movie where the camera's whipping around all nuts like TMZ. And, you're like, am I in a movie? You see them bring the baby over, he's crying, they're weighing him. They're like, do you want a picture? And you're like, I guess so. Do you want to cut the umbilical cord? It's so overwhelming.
Yes.
That
absolutely,
you're like, again, like Bill Burr, you're like, how does anybody do this? But it's been happening forever. It's what brought us into the world. But I think that must have been that much more intense with all that was going on. Like, you had to actually, this is the part that amazes me, and I have like so much, respect's not the word, but admiration, that you had to go through a birth. Like, that's what, they call it, a still birth. You had to actually, I can't imagine the process is very different than having a baby, right?
It's ironic about everything. You would think that when the stillborn child comes out, that you'd be emotional and crying. And Celeste and I were very calm and still when that happened. It was just a total opposite of when Annarose was born. I don't know why, but I think it was just because we became at peace knowing that she had passed, but Celeste still has to give birth to her. And, we had already cried a lot leading up to that moment where, it's a day later now and they had to induce her and get the baby out. And when Rosa was stillborn, there was no crying. We were just like in awe looking at her. And, I just remember Celeste kept saying, look how beautiful she is. She's so beautiful. And we were just looking at her face, and we were like in awe and amazed how beautiful she was, even though she had already passed a day prior. There was no tears. It was just a beautiful moment. There were tears that came later, of course, but... And
there's 2 days you spend with her, right? In the hospital?
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout those 2 days with all the families visiting, you share a lot of tears. And at the same time, you appreciate the time you have with the child for the 48 hours. But...
Is that difficult? That, like, I don't mean, that's an obvious question, but like those days, those 2 days and going through it, is there a part of you that, because you said you would break down every time someone would come in and say they're sorry, or,
yeah.
Is that it? Isn't it almost difficult in the sense, like, you want people there to be there for you, but then sometimes you're like, I just want like nothingness right now. Or are you okay with the constant kind of support? But like you almost want just like to not be hit with it all, right?
Well, we did have, I would say, the last 12 hours. We woke up the morning of knowing that, okay, this is going to be the last, 12 hours we have with Rosa. There were no visitors that day. Nobody came in. And
people knew that, like knew. It was almost like, was it just
in a weird way, kind of like when a dog knows another dog is really sick and on their way out, the dog leaves them alone.
Yeah.
Even though like most times the two dogs, they grow up together, they go nuts, they have fun together. But it's kind of like, I think it's just an instinct, a natural instinct where people know leading up to something like that, you just leave them alone. And we didn't even have to say it to anybody. We didn't have to say to anybody, we don't want visitors today. People just knew not to bother us. They just let us do our last bit of grieving. And yeah, the toughest thing about that day was obviously the moment when the nurse looks at you, it's time, and they have to take the baby away. That was really, really rough, because it's not like you walk the baby into a room or anything. The baby's sitting in this little
bassinet,
like a tiny little plastic bassinet with a cloth on it, and they just have to wheel her away. And I understand too now why they say 48 hours, because the baby's body, like anybody's body, when you pass and your blood's no longer flowing, it starts to shrivel, starts to shrink, and yeah, you could what a difference from like when she was first stillborn to 2 days later when she's still sitting there. Her color had changed drastically, and her body actually got smaller. And I mean, obviously that's why they tell you get 48 hours max, and then you have to go. But no matter what, you just don't want to leave. You want that time to stand still so you get another little bit of time with her. And I don't even know if I told Celeste this, but I actually recorded her rocking Rosa like one last time and singing to her before they had to take her away. So I kept that on my phone.
Were you like literally depressed for like quite some time after that, or did you find a way to maintain some semblance of your normal self?
I wasn't depressed. I wasn't. I was kind of at peace with everything. I feel, and I'm not just saying that because, I have to be the strong one. I don't know if I learned how to deal with these things from the time I was young. Because like you had said earlier, my sister passed away of cancer when I was in second grade. And she had been in ninth grade, 8th grade going into ninth grade. And I think as a little kid, I got used to being around family members who were dealing with something really sad.
Ever present.
And you know how little children are. They're very smart, and they pick up on things, and they learn a lot from a very early age. And I feel like from that moment on, I just felt, like we're meant to be here on Earth for however long we have, and when our time comes, we'll know about it. And I'm accepting of that. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I'm a Buddhist. I don't know what I am. No, well, I'm a practicing Catholic, but I feel like there's something greater after this, and if you were meant to live for 20 years, that's what God had in mind for you. And if you make it to my great grandfather's age of 100, wow, then more power to you. But we all have a purpose in this world, and once our time is up, our time is up.
I just have to imagine though, it's not like so that happened in May, right? You said with Rosa,
May 30th.
So,
but we found out on May 27th, that she had passed away, and then it was May. Now that I think about it, maybe it was May 29th.
But
but it was right around that time.
But like the point is, you're dropped in a period of time. You're a big sports guy. All that, you probably could give a damn about the Yankees, or was it the opposite, where you were like, I just need to bury myself in a game right now?
Well, I didn't care about sports after that for a few weeks, because all I was concentrating on was figuring out the funeral arrangements and staying in touch with people, letting them know what had happened. I didn't go back to work for 10 days. There was no...
It's just not an easy process. Like, there's just nothing about that process that's
nothing normal.
Easy or normal.
Not for sure. There was no... I could care less about what was going on in the NBA playoffs at that time, or what the Yankees were doing. It wasn't until I think I went back to school, and that was like with 2 weeks left in the school year. I want to say that was when I kind of started to get into my normal routine a little bit, and
what was going through your mind in that process? Like, was there, I always go to memories from the past, or like weird things from books or music, or just something that keeps me baseline when tough things are happening. Is there anything like a flashbulb memory that you remember from that time where it was like, this helped get me through, other than my relationship with my wife or my family, like this thing personally helped get me through this? It sounds like it was school, right? In a way. Well,
not exactly, because school had ended. The summer
true.
Summer was out, 2 weeks later, and then I had the whole summer to grieve.
Yeah.
But I would say I tried really quickly to get back into whatever I would normally do, call up a friend and let's go hang out.
Well, that's an interesting point, to get dropped off into summer on the heels of that, and to literally, and you don't have to do a lot of music stuff till it really heats up in August, right?
Yeah.
So like you're dropped off sort of out of school with this happening, and like you wake up each morning and you got to put your one foot in front of the other, kind of without some organizing principle there. You have to figure out what you're going to do to get through it all, and to...
Yeah, Celeste and I, we tried to keep ourselves busy that summer, going down the shore. But even when we did that, it was difficult because you would be around other families, and you can't avoid that. So every time you see another couple with a child, it just reminds you of what you could have had, but you don't. So that was tough. So I would say, as much as we tried to go out and live normal lives, we were better off sometimes just staying in our home, hanging out with the dogs, going on walks. I'd go to the movies with my buddy Matt religiously, like every Friday or Saturday night, once a week. I saw more movies that year than probably my whole life combined.
And everything came back to babies, though, right? No matter what you did. Like you had to, you almost have to fight in life. You mean
in the movies even?
In everything you're experiencing. Like you're saying, you go to the shore, there's like, you can't, like you almost realize when something like that happens, you can find that thing you're trying to avoid in everything.
You're right. Because on TV, you'd watch a commercial and then all of a sudden it would be about a baby, and you're like, oh, geez.
And you never noticed that before because it's just the background.
It's just whatever. It's just a part of life. But when you're trying to avoid it,
it finds you.
It's
always there.
Everywhere you go, it finds you. A picture on the wall, a commercial on television, a person walking down the block with a child or in a baby carriage. Yeah, it's always around you.
And the dynamic of being married in the whole thing, and you've been with Celeste a long time.
Yeah, you know what? A statistic that we had learned after Rosa was that I think they said 50 or 75% of marriages end after a loss of a child. Now, I don't know if that counts miscarriages, stillborns. Maybe that's having a child for a period of time and then losing the child. So I'm not exactly sure what bearing that statistic has. But when I heard it, I was like, wow, I guess a lot of couples just can't handle the loss and would rather just start fresh, start new.
It's almost like seeing the other person is a memory, as terrible as that is.
Exactly right. And that's what a lot of people say, that lose a child. They want to just go somewhere else. They'll move to another state. They'll go find another partner.
But like you said, when you were thinking about if Rosa was born, if there was some kind of handicap, and not to say that you were like ooh, I dodged a bullet. Like, not to say you wouldn't
No,
have embraced that, but it's a double-edged sword, because while people who lose a child could break up, a lot of people who have a difficult raising circumstance of a child, that could break
also
break
end a
marriage too.
Yeah, it could. You hear about that too, because you learn a lot about your partner when you're going through tough times.
Absolutely,
For sure. Absolutely.
So I guess Celeste is here, but why don't we say, she could almost come on.
Yeah, I think she'll probably be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bring the baby.
Although I brought a dirty diaper because I didn't.
Well, that's
All right.
okay. Well, here, we'll get her set up. So Celeste is now here. John, you could take the baby, whichever
Cut
one.
out that whole part about the
Divorce?
No.
I'm kidding.
The religion.
What religion?
What
I
religion?
started talking.
Oh, you didn't go that deep.
I started rambling about Buddhism and stuff. I don't know. Just cut
That's
that all
not
out.
religious. That's not that religious. It wasn't even as bad as you think.
I don't know. That was horrible.
Can you stay right there, John?
Yeah.
I'll go right here. I'm sorry, I have a dirty diaper in my hand. I just didn't know where I should put it. If you have like a diaper genie, or if you.
You know, I'll just get get yourself.
Aw.
I'll just throw it in my garbage.
Okay. Are you sure you can take?
Look at you.
dirty diaper?
She looks so happy.
She
Aw.
is very happy. She really wanted a pacifier. She didn't eat very much.
Oh.
She ended up like falling asleep on me.
Hey, little pretty.
Okay, I guess I got.
This is fun.
Don't you feel like real?
I don't have the ability to speak. I guess I don't know. My brain just doesn't work that way. I don't have the ability to speak sentences.
No, yes you do.
No, everything.
This is all live, by the way, John.
Just
No.
like you're talking to a friend.
No. But I don't. When I talk like this, I pause between almost every word I say.
That's okay.
That's not what you're saying.
I'm thinking about what I'm saying, maybe too much.
It's natural.
Yeah, don't worry about.
Ah,
Don't worry about it.
that's
so
why
much.
you have to
Don't
give
overthink
credit
it.
to like Howard Stern, how he just talks. And
No, you don't, because the thing I always say, the audience doesn't know what's in your head. They only know what you say. And you're speaking normally about, it's not like I'm saying,
yeah, I know, but I feel like I'm pausing between every word.
tell
I'm
me
saying.
about North Korea. What do you think? You know, like, it's not
No,
like
no,
I'm,
no.
yeah.
Oh god, then I'll feel like Miss America trying to like answer an interview question.
So we have the first appearance of Annarose.
Here we have her.
She's on.
Yeah.
And Celeste has come on, and they're both looking at me. So we've done quite a bit of work with John here. I feel like this is
can't wait to hear it.
and I think we'll just seg it just like this. So we were talking about, which a lot of this we covered with you, Celeste, on our last one, but we were just talking about going through the grieving process and then leading up to the next stage. And I couldn't believe that we did our last podcast 1 year ago, I think today, and then it's released 1 year ago tomorrow. But it's unbelievable how much happened in 1 year.
A lot has happened in a year. And honestly, I was upstairs thinking about, like, man, how are we even going to get this thing started? Because just trying to rethink of everything that happened. And just then I started thinking about our whole journey from the very beginning when we first started trying to build our family. And it's just kind of crazy when you think about the big picture. And like you said, this past year, so much has happened, and it feels almost like a time warp, especially since February 1st, which is the birthday of this little rainbow baby that I'm holding in my hands right now. So a lot has happened, and time seems to be going at a different speed than before.
Well, it sounds like from John truly learned to let the waterworks come out through this whole process. But I think when you have the baby, I mean, that's as a man, and speaking for John and John speaking as well, we're like completely overwhelmed, almost like panic attack overwhelmed. The woman is having almost panic attacks and shaking when they have the baby.
You know what it is? I feel like from my point of view, I felt like I just had 9 months to prepare for the reality that a baby was coming. But I think it might be a different experience when you're not actually carrying the baby yourself, because there's that bond that I was privileged to have. And honestly, thinking about our whole journey, there was a point where we were talking about the possibility of using a gestational carrier, just because with our loss, we didn't know why that happened. So much of our journey has been unexplained infertility. We don't know why you had the vanishing twin. We don't know why this isn't working. We don't know why your daughter had all these congenital anomalies. It just was happening unexplained. And it just, we're going to hand off the baby and say goodbye to Annarose. But yeah, a lot of it was unexplained. And so we didn't know what the problem was. Why wasn't this working? Why couldn't I get pregnant? Why couldn't I hold the pregnancy from before? And so we were thinking about the possibility of a gestational carrier, because what if my uterus was the problem? Mm-hmm. I have an autoimmune disease. What if that was causing things to be complicated? And I mean, we knew that with that autoimmune disease, I have Sjogren's syndrome. Mm-hmm. And there is a risk that comes along of fetal heart block, because the antibodies that I have from the autoimmune disease could pass to the baby through the placenta and cause fetal heart block, which could be as serious as putting the pregnancy at risk, higher risk for a miscarriage. To if the baby did get that condition, then you might need to have a pacemaker, for example, if it was that severe. So a gestational carrier was something that we did think about. I mean, the whole journey, we have considered pretty much every option that is available, and it's amazing how many options there are. Thinking down to maybe we should consider an adoption, and maybe we should consider the gestational carrier. Maybe we should think about, we were just thinking about every possible option. And sometimes it could be a little overwhelming, when you think about that.
It's completely overwhelming.
Totally overwhelming.
Having a baby in general is just overwhelming. And then when you have to add all these other pieces, and then you have to deal with adults living lives, going to jobs, paying the bills, all the normal stuff that causes...
Trying to live your life and march on in the face of all of the adversity that you might face, just in general. I mean, everybody has their own story. Mm-hmm. And, the loss was really, really
profound.
Hard. Yeah, it was hard. Profound is a good word, better word. Just today we were leaving church, and there is a parishioner who's moving to Colorado. So she was saying goodbye to everybody. And she said to us, I'm so sorry for what you guys have been through. It's just mind-boggling that is something that happens, that can happen. And it's nice when people acknowledge the loss. I think a lot of times people are afraid of how to bring up the topic, so they just don't. A lot of times people,
or they do it so awkwardly that everybody's feeling like, what happened here?
Yeah, and sometimes that happens, but everyone has their own preference on how to deal with it. But for me, I would prefer maybe a little bit of an awkward exchange with a good intention behind there, rather than feeling like nobody remembered that my baby existed. So it was nice of her to say that. And it was just, I guess, like you said, a whole year has passed since we have done this. And a lot has changed in terms of our life. It has been turned upside down in the best way possible. We have our rainbow baby. She's here. And I still look at her and I'm like, she's real. I can't believe I'm actually looking at this baby and this is my life right now. How different it is.
Do you ever wake up and a start still kind of like, wait, is this real?
Yeah, well, not like was happening a year ago, or maybe like a year and a half ago. I would wake up and in a panic, literally a panic attack. And I was in a crisis, a life crisis, as far as, oh my gosh, this dream of mine may never come true.
Yeah.
And what if, all that what if thinking, I had big thoughts of what if Rosa and Robin, my twins that I had lost, what if they were the closest I ever got to having a baby. I mean, technically I did have a baby and I still count them, you know. It's always so hard because we see people see a baby now, they see Annarose and they say, oh, is this your first? Yeah. And that is such a hard question to answer. John, I hear him laughing in the background because
you don't know how to, you just almost are like, well, is this worth the conversation with this person? Right. Do I just want to kind of, oh, here he comes. He's got something to say here.
He's got something to say.
This is John's thing.
Well, the thing with us, I'm filling in the gaps here because we have different thoughts on the matter.
Which is an interesting part of this.
I know. It's the same baby that we're explaining, and his rationale is completely different than mine.
Yeah, so my rationale, I think this is...
This feels like This American Life, by the way. It really does.
This might be the guy thing. This could be a guy thing. I don't know. If it's a stranger, a cashier at a supermarket, I don't want to get into details with them. Right. I just say, oh, yeah, this is our first. Thank you very much. I don't want to explain to them what happened. But if it's somebody that I'm friendly with or somebody who I'm willing to spend the time to have a conversation with them that's going to last more than just a quick 5 seconds, then I'll say, oh, we had a loss prior to this child. And then that gives them the chance, if they want, to say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And then if you do have to explain, you have the moment to explain. But I don't want to do that in a supermarket to a stranger. I don't want to do that to some, an old lady on the street who I just happen to be walking past and she happens to ask the question. I don't want to get into it with her. Yeah. I don't know. I just have my...
Well, and it doesn't even have to really be that question. I think we self-edit ourselves in regular life anyway, because there's some things where you go, it'll be awkward to extend this conversation with this person. Nothing against them, but I'm just getting my coffee.
Yeah. Well, in those situations where it's, I'm probably never ever going to see this person ever again. For me, I personally feel like, yes, I have to, I say yes every single time without question. And sometimes I will, just, or not say yes. I'm sorry. It depends on how the question's phrased because that was just awkward. If someone asks me, is this your first baby? And I don't want to get into it, then I just say no. And then
that's true.
Leave it at that.
You don't have to get into if they have siblings.
Exactly. And sometimes they'll ask, oh, how old is your other child? And then I will explain. She was 30 weeks and 3 days at the time of her fetal demise. We unfortunately had a stillbirth, and her twin we lost earlier in the pregnancy. Yeah. And if they want to continue the conversation, I am very thankful for the opportunities to talk about my babies who are up in heaven, because that's all that remains of them, and so for me, everyone's different. And I think maybe for John, I don't know, it's a sensitive subject. And sometimes the person who asks the question, you can see the wheels turning in their head of where they're like, whoa, I feel really sorry for even asking, because now all of a sudden where I'm in a conversation that I don't know how to navigate this. And sometimes I will, most of the times I feel bad for the person who I'm talking to, because I realize I just brought the conversation way down. They were just looking for shooting the breeze, and they see a cute baby and they just want to talk to someone. Yeah, exactly. They want to talk to somebody. They want to say hi to the baby, and they're just trying to be friendly. And then here I am being like, well, yeah, I had a baby who died, right? Since you asked. But I'm learning, I guess, whenever people, bring up the topic, to see it more in a positive light. Sure. Not that because I went through a phase of my grief where my whole world was just dark, because the only baby who I thought that I was ever going to have, both of them, they were twins. The only babies that I thought I was going to have, they died. And there's no way to make that sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. Right. There's just no way. Right. And but in a way you kind of have to, because I went through a time where whenever I would talk about the loss or think about the loss, it was just darkness all the time. And I guess I had a realization within my grief that I just didn't want the memory to always be dark.
Right.
It is. And there are definitely times where I just feel so sad. And it, it's not like I had another baby, and now I'm cured from that sadness. I mean, I still remember my babies who I lost, and but now I guess I've found a way to kind of integrate them into my life and to bring them up without always feeling so sad and so heavy. I mean, it definitely complicated a lot of, and a complication, I guess that's like a kind of a harsh way to say, because I almost feel like guilty that I'm blaming two babies for complicating my life.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, it did make things different with my pregnancy. Pregnancy after infertility is difficult enough, even without going through a loss. When I was pregnant with Rosa and Robin, and at first, things seemed like they were going well. We had about 2 weeks where things were like blissful and just like, wow, I'm pregnant and it's probably twins, because we knew we transferred two, and I just had this feeling
we're
that
at cruising altitude.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. I just felt like everything was going well, and I just felt happy, and like we finally got to the other side of this difficult journey. And little did we know that it was about to explode in our faces. So then we had a little bit of a bleeding scare, but both of the babies were fine. And after that, and after going through all of that infertility, it's enough to like scare you. So that way you don't want to breathe. You don't want to move. You are afraid of like rocking the boat.
Yeah. And
unfortunately in that pregnancy, everything always went from like bad to worse until finally we got to the very unfortunate outcome where we lost them both. And so going into a subsequent pregnancy.
How did that, I use the word mar, but how did the experience of the first pregnancy affect this one? Were you really fragile on this one mentally?
I expected to be.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. It was kind of a miracle. And
you were like liberated almost?
I know it's funny because when I came down here, John said that you guys had talked a little bit about some religion. And for me...
He didn't even talk that... I don't think he didn't talk that much about it. Okay. He just said a funny thing about Buddhism.
Oh, that's funny. But whatever it is, for me, everyone goes through their grief in a way. But for me, spirituality is something that actually really helped me through my experience, and it still helps me now. And my religion really became very important to me. And I don't know, I guess when something like that happens, it's a life event that just changes everything. It could either bring you, I think, closer to certain things, including religion and including your spouse and your partner or every relationship that you have. But in terms of religion, it either brings you closer or it drives you apart, drives you away from the religion. And for me personally, it brought me closer. And so I feel like that faith that I had found really helped to bring me through. Also, I really worked hard on a daily commitment to meditation, guided meditations.
Do you use an app?
I do, actually.
With Headspace?
Not Headspace. I've never tried it, although I've heard it's pretty good. I use the app Calm, and it's awesome. I really do think
How does it work? Is it like an hour a day or 15 minutes a day or something?
It could be as little as 2 minutes a day. The neat thing about that app is that it has guided meditations for all different types. And if you need, for example, emergency calm, there are times where I'm just really having a hard time and I'm feeling very emotional and I need to calm down. And so I can turn on emergency calm, and it gives you an option for a 2-minute meditation up to, I think, even a 30-minute.
Such a modern day world fix.
But it's very practical.
Oh,
it's so practical, and it's really come in handy for me. So I'm kind of proud of myself, and I'm going to brag a little bit that I have a over 475-day meditation streak.
Really?
I have not missed a day.
It's like that Snapchat thing where somebody keeps a streak alive, but for a good reason.
Yeah. Actually, what ended up happening with that is I started the streak just because it was a New Year's resolution. I just wanted to, and coming through my grief, it actually kind of ties into working through the grief of the loss. And I needed to learn how to take care of myself and to really focus on my self-care. And so from one of my New Year's resolutions was to do at least 15 minutes a day of self-care, something that is just for me. And meditation was one of the things that I ended up really focusing on. And so I started that streak. And then I was like, oh, now I don't want this to become an obsessive thing where I have to keep the streak alive.
Yeah, because now it's like you do this to avoid anxiety, and now the thing is causing, it's like so human.
But at this point, it's become such a habit that I just do it. And
right.
I mean, if I think about it, if I were to end the streak, I would probably, like if I accidentally missed a day and realized, oh no, the streak is over, I think I'd be disappointed, but it wouldn't be like totally devastating. You know what I mean?
Well, kids change that kind of stuff where you like have all these streaks and you're like, let me get a streak of sleep.
Yeah. Oh man, that's definitely the truth.
But it's funny when it's funny how important, especially in today's society of like digital everything in your face, just the act of turning your mind off, whether it's through aids like apps, whether it's yoga, hot yoga, whether it's working out or running or which you've done pretty much all the above. It's just so important to turn off. And there was a thing that came out this week and it was in the political realm. And there was a Secretary of State maybe called George Shultz. And he was, 20, 30 years ago, I think. And he had this thing called the Shultz Hour. And this is a guy who's like the Secretary of State. I could be wrong on what cabinet position. I think it was that, but an important person. And his thing was, every day, he made sure it was in his schedule. He's off limits for 1 hour, and he'd shut his office door. Someone who's in charge of like America's interaction with the world. He'd shut his office door, and he would just do something that he could focus on. He was only allowed either the president or his wife were the only people who could cut in to that hour. But it's just so important.
It is.
You have to have it. You break. I mean, this is about your journey, but if you're at work and you have the ability to go to lunch or you don't, or you stay, you work through it. Sometimes working through it's the worst possible thing you can do because you go 9 to 5 with no break and all you are is an anxious mess. Whereas if you go, nobody's going to care. I'm going to cut off at 12:15. I'm going to walk a mile and come back, and you're just completely lucid. You're completely at ease. You're fine. You broke it up, and the rest of your day is way more productive.
And it's interesting because tying it into the whole theme of this podcast with the infertility and with the loss and all of like everything that we've been through, I had to learn that lesson the hard way, that I just kept pushing myself because I kept thinking all I have to do is just get pregnant and then everything's going to be better. And so I would work to get pregnant. And then I did get pregnant and everything was not better. And so it was just all of this like cognitive distortions that if I just achieve this next level, or if I just get to this next thing and make this next achievement, then everything is going to be back to, that balance in my life that I liked.
Right.
And then I ended up coming to learn that life as I know it is over. And the sooner that I accept that, the better off I will be. And I think that actually really did help me to find this new mindset going into the new pregnancy that like I expected to be a basket case. And I wasn't. And it was kind of eerie in a way because I was just like, okay, well, I feel like I should be a little bit more nervous than I am. I mean, I felt like I was just a healthy amount of nervousness, Well,
if you don't give that mindfulness period of time, like you're talking about with meditation, you're literally just a constant flailing mess.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have something that gives you a baseline, that you are happy without anything intersecting into your life. You're happy just sitting there, being mindful. You need to at baseline be happy, regardless of internal or external pressures.
Absolutely. And taking care of yourself, taking that time out of your day. I think that's an important lesson for every single person on the planet to learn. But especially in my case, I feel like I am trying to bring another life into the world, and I was running myself into the ground. I wasn't even taking care of myself. How can you possibly care for another human being if you can't care for yourself? So I needed to step back and learn that lesson, unfortunately, the hard way, and learn how to take care of myself. And I feel like I did a lot of work, because we had a lot of delays in terms of doctors telling us, you have to wait until X, Y, and Z is right before you can do another transfer, because we were going to do another cycle with the doctors. We had frozen embryos left from our cycle that we had done with Rosa and Robin. And so we kind of had hurdles to clear before we could actually get into another transfer. And honestly, it was, I knew I was ready to proceed with the next transfer when we finally got to the point where everything was looking like we were ready to proceed. And actually last year, 1 year ago, at the time of our podcast, I was supposed to have done the transfer that would have brought us Annarose. But we ended up getting canceled right before. It was the day before we were supposed to move on to the next step in the process to do a frozen embryo transfer. And I went in, and the doctor looked at my lining and said, I don't really understand what I'm seeing here. It's not the typical pattern that we're supposed to be seeing, and it's not quite right. I want you to come in and see your doctor, because you see whatever doctor happens to be there during morning monitoring.
Right.
So I went to see my primary doctor in the practice, and when she took a look, she said, you know what, it's not perfect, and I don't want to waste an embryo, because the embryos are so precious. And
yes. You were at 2 at that point.
We were at 2.
I remember I was listening back to the podcast.
Yeah, you remember well.
I listened to it today a little bit.
Oh, good. We had 6 embryos that were created during that cycle, and we transferred 2. One was Rosa, one was Robin, and then we had 4 remaining. And then of the 4 remaining, we decided to have them thawed and tested. And 2 came back abnormal. So if we had transferred them, they would not have attached. They would not have implanted. The doctor said that the particular translocation that we had, I think it was the 14th chromosome, either 13 or 14. I think it was 14. It was 14, not 13, because trisomy 13 is actually one of the common ones that they would actually test for, but it was an unusual one. And she said that they wouldn't have even implanted. And I'm so grateful that we decided to have them tested, because...
And the reason you wait is because it can be so expensive.
It is. I mean...
And it's like, it's so important, but it's like, it's crazy when you have to make that decision. Almost like sometimes when you go to the doctor and you're like, wait, I'm making a business decision right now?
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's honestly, another sidebar onto that is how, insurance doesn't cover that step, and a lot of times insurances doesn't cover anything at all.
You would think they'd want to cover this, because in some ways, as much as you can insure, you're ensuring that what is going to be born is pretty much tested out to be at the higher levels of what those 2 people can come up with.
Right. Exactly. You would think that they would, but
less health insurance through their life, maybe. It's weird.
Exactly. And I don't know. I mean, we decided to do the testing, and we kind of hemmed and hawed and went back and forth on it because of the expense. It wasn't covered. And on one side of the coin, you could think, okay, well, let's just transfer and see what happens. But on the other side, I was thinking, well, what if what happens is what happened with Rosa? Or what happened with Robin.
So Rosa and Robin were potentially like the 2 that were tested out. You don't know that, obviously. So
we know Rosa would have passed the test.
Oh, okay.
Because we had a placental analysis done after her demise, and it all came back.
Okay.
as being genetically normal, which, like I said, unexplained all the way through. Unexplained infertility, unexplained losses. The explanation for Rosa's loss is that she had congenital anomalies and complications from that caused her fetal demise. But with Robin, because we lost him or her so early, we lost Robin at 7 weeks, 6 days, and
which is very early.
Early, and because it was a vanishing twin and the surviving twin was still growing, we couldn't test any of that tissue because there was none.
Right.
So we have no idea about, could have been an abnormal embryo and we just didn't know about it. Another thing that's interesting about that is we don't know if Robin was a boy or a girl, and we won't ever get to find that out because we didn't have those two embryos tested. But we decided to have the 4 frozen embryos tested. 2 were normal, one of which was our little Annarose, and we have another one that's still frozen in time.
That's always the most amazing thing, that in some ways they're all twins.
Yeah.
And they're like, staggered births, but they're all like the same.
That's true.
They would be fraternal twins, right, at that point?
Yeah, their conception date is always
It's so crazy how
the same.
It's so crazy how that's the point. So in some ways, when you say unexplained, Annarose is like an unexplained birth, because you look at the way everything fell. You look at that. You look at that Rosa would have passed a test. It's like the miracle. It's the miracle of birth and life.
Yeah.
In general, it's crazy.
And what's even crazier about that is that, because there was a time when I was thinking about, before we did the transfer, and I was thinking about becoming pregnant again and transferring one of these embryos. And that kind of, in a way, created a little bit of anxiety, because knowing that Rosa was going to pass the test.
You'd almost have rather, in some ways, that
it's a double-edged sword, right? Exactly.
There's no rather, but
there's a catch-22 to that, because it's, in a way, it would have been nice to have had an explanation, so that way we would have felt a little bit more at ease with there being less of a reoccurrence with a subsequent pregnancy. But we didn't have that situation. In our situation, it was just, okay, we don't really understand why, and the best that we can do is just say if we wanted to really settle our minds, we could have said, okay, well, we're going to use an embryo from another couple, for example. And, there's such a thing as embryo adoption. And we could have said, okay, we're going to take a tested embryo from a proven donor and use a gestational carrier.
Yeah.
We could have gone that way.
Putting a phone together.
Exactly. And, a lot of times people will misunderstand in the media about IVF and the technology and think that it's just
they really do. And
synthetic.
So many people, like, if only people weren't made to feel like they're lesser than, and the amount of people who do it came out.
Yeah.
I think people would be completely shocked.
It's true. It's just because of that big misunderstanding.
Test tube baby. It's like all these terrible,
it's like
Dolly the sheep as a baby. It's like, it's just, it's a mirror. It's as much a miracle as what would they call it? I guess natural birth, but I don't know, spontaneous combustion.
Pregnancy, yeah. Oh, feels like that.
So, yeah. And I think we've said this every time, but just the fact when you think of 2 kids who have a one night stand in college and they're freaking out.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when you think you could have been those people in college. And then when you see the fight to get to a baby, and it's like, you look back at that and you're like, oh, the naivety of those times.
Exactly. And it's kind of interesting to me, because a lot of times people will look at their IVF baby and say that it's a miracle. And it's absolutely true. Every single IVF baby is a miracle. But in my opinion, every single baby is a miracle, because it's just all of the things that have to happen in order for it to go right.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
It really
you can't keep track of it. And going into the pregnancy with Annarose, I should have been a basket case, but I wasn't. And it was because of that, There was no logical explanation for it.
Dominoes or whatever. It's just so, other than the mindfulness stuff, literally something just a switch flipped where you were just able to kind of go along and stay ahead of the demons.
I think a part of it was just that we were forced to take so much time before we were able to proceed. At first, when we had Rosa in the hospital, the doctor said to wait at least 6 months to allow the uterus to heal before transferring another embryo. Okay, fine. And then after those 6 months had passed, there were all of these things that just kept popping up that we had to fix this, we had to fix that. I had to take care of myself and get myself into a better place mentally to be able to go forward with it. We still had questions about, should we test the embryos? Should we not? We decided, okay, we're going to test the embryos. That takes some time. Then finally we get through all of those hurdles. And like I said, we got to April. We were supposed to do the transfer. And right when we got to that one particular step, right before we were supposed to start the next medication, I ended up getting canceled because my lining was just not looking perfect. Doctor didn't want to proceed and waste a perfectly good embryo on a lining that wasn't ideal. If we could make it better, we were going to try for that. And I'm thankful for that. And I knew I was in a much better place because when that happened, the emotion that I felt was just disappointment. But at the same time, I was able to have a level enough head to realize this wasn't a disaster. This was just a little hiccup, and we'll try again next month. I did get a little bit nervous, though, because then the following month, when we went to do the next cycle and try again, it seemed like my lining was starting to go down the same path with the way that it was kind of like falling apart. And I remember I had an appointment for morning monitoring. I go in, the doctor, who I don't even remember which doctor it was, but he or she looked and said, I'm not really sure what I'm looking at here, but I think I want you to come back and see your doctor. So I went and I saw my doctor, and I remember I had an appointment for acupuncture that evening, and I'm telling you, I went to my acupuncturist and I said, Joanne, I need you to work your magic, please. And I mean, she did some like pretty crazy stuff. She did the e-stim, where they put the needles in for the acupuncture, but then they also add like it looks like a little mini car battery to charge it. And like they put a little electronic stimulation on those needles. So it worked. I go the next day for my appointment with my doctor, and she said, your lining looks perfect. Let's proceed. And so we went forward and followed the steps, and we did the transfer. And that's when John's level of anxiety started going way up.
Oh, really?
And what's interesting is mine went way down. I felt really calm and just like I was reassuring him all the way through. Like, okay, well, we don't have a reason right now to be feeling anxious.
Was it almost like in his head he couldn't have that happen again?
Yeah, and I mean, no one wants to see that happen again.
I mean, you didn't as well, but I mean, like he's just like what he can't control was just eating him up.
Exactly, and I mean, there was a point. I remember when we were considering testing the embryos, he even said, "I kind of wish that we could keep them just like frozen forever
in time,
because then at least we always have that hope.
We always have the shot."
Exactly, but obviously, you can't live like that. Number one, paying that bill month after month, it gets expensive.
It's like hosting a website.
And number two, I mean, you got to take the shot. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Exactly.
Right? So we had to go for it. And I just felt calm. I did feel pretty nervous for the first, obviously I felt a healthy dose of nervous for the beta. So they do the blood test to tell you yay or nay whether or not you were pregnant. And I mean, you could test at home if you wanted to use a home pregnancy test, but we decided not to. And I didn't even have a single test in the house because we just did not want to test. We just were afraid, honestly. Yeah. I was afraid of wrecking the good zen that I had going on. I found a way to kind of keep myself from losing my mind. And I was enjoying being puppo, P-U-P-O, pregnant unless proven otherwise. And so I was just enjoying that. And
It's better than poo-poo.
Yeah, exactly. Which is pretty much what our life is right now.
That's true.
All the poop. But the being pregnant unless proven otherwise, I realized this is a moment that I'm not ever going to have again with this embryo, and this could be all that I get. So I don't want to waste this time feeling like
Anxious.
Exactly. I want to try to stay level and enjoy it for what it is, because if this is all that we get, then that's all we get, you know?
Yeah.
The thing with IVF and all of that is that it's not guaranteeing you a baby. It's guaranteeing you a chance to try your best to have a baby.
Yes.
But it's not going to guarantee you an outcome, which for a long time, it was hard for me to wrap my head around that, because I just felt like this is so unfair. If you're going to go through all of this and pay all of that money in a lot of cases, and also go through all of that anguish, you should be guaranteed what
I'm going to
you
put my money in the stock market. I better make
Exactly.
money. I can't lose money on this.
Exactly. But that's just not the way that it works. And I think coming to that realization and accepting that, yeah, it's pretty scary, you know, knowing that it could not work. I have to say that it was reassuring knowing that we did have another embryo.
Right.
So that if Annarose did not result in a live birth, then we had another chance. And I am very grateful in the fact that she was the most reassuring baby ever. We were very, very monitored throughout the pregnancy.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, what was the give and take like with these doctors who had gone through the previous one with you, right? Pretty much all the same doctors. Were they all just like, they're on your team almost?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Intensely, like, they can't, it's like, this is happening, and it just keeps happening. Are they almost like
they're
those people on the
invested.
sidelines,
Oh, yeah.
like giving you the orange slices in the run?
Exactly. I love that. Yes, 100%. And I mean, our doctors are amazing, and I cannot speak highly enough of them. They are the best of the best, not only because they're just so good at their job, they're competent, and they get the results.
They're like scientists and doctors.
But also, every single doctor and nurse on our team was also so compassionate, and just, we really needed a doctor who was going to understand where we were coming from and hold our hand a little bit. Not in terms of, having already gone through pregnancy, I understood what was kind of normal and what was scary, you know. So whenever I would have symptoms or lack of symptoms, you know, the first time around, that kind of freaked me out. Like, we lost Robin, and then all of my pregnancy symptoms went away. And that was the scariest thing, because I thought, okay, we're losing this other one. We could go for our ultrasound next week and they could tell me, sorry, we lost the other one. And that was very scary. So just having a compassionate doctor all the way through, who had amazing bedside manner, really did help. And every single specialist along the way, and we had many.
Yeah.
They were just awesome. They were really good, and I'm very thankful for that. We had weekly appointments pretty much the entire pregnancy, and sometimes I ended up having more than one appointment a week. I remember there was a stretch of 2 months where I literally had at least one appointment every single week, and most weeks I had 2 or 3. So, not seeing the same doctor, but because there were so many specialists that I needed to go see, I was in doctor's offices a lot.
What was it like at the end? Like when it was like, all right, here we are. And then the doctors are kind of saying, here we are. And you're like, here we are.
Absolutely
Is it just
surreal.
Like, what the heck's going on here?
Absolutely surreal. I remember the baby shower. And that was surreal. And when we had the crib delivered, like, that was just, I was like pinching myself, and like the delivery men probably thought I was crazy because I was crying. Like, I was off in a corner crying while they were putting it in, because I just couldn't believe my eyes that this was actually happening.
It's like being at a job and they're like, you know what, we're going to give you a raise today. And then 2 weeks later, we're going to give you another raise. We're going to keep giving.
Exactly. Or like, having the promise of a raise and then actually seeing the money come in.
True. Yeah.
Because with the first pregnancy, we had the promise of there being 1 or 2 babies, and then we didn't get to take them home. So this time it was like the whole time it was like almost like you have to have this, like I had this like protective bubble around myself, and then I would let it down just enough for whatever I could handle to let it in that like this is really happening. Because if I let it in all at one time, then I mean it was just so overwhelming. The emotions were just.
Did you get back a part of yourself that like you hadn't had in years?
1,000%. Yeah. Like I just I can't. It's hard to put it into words. And the best was when she was born. Sure. You know, I just wanted to hear her voice. Like that was the thing.
You wanted her ushered to the threshold. You wanted it, you know, I do.
Exactly.
But as a baby.
It was, I mean, it wasn't enough to just see her face. I wanted to hear her cry. I wanted to hear, yes, exactly. Because I just wanted to.
And then John crying probably really kicked it into gear, right? You need to hear both of those cries.
I don't even remember what John's process was.
He said he cried a lot.
I don't remember that because the whole time I was just like, I wouldn't shut up. They put her on my chest and I was just, oh, she's so beautiful. I love her so much. I just kept
and you had like
repeating.
The shakes and stuff, right? Did you get that too?
I was just repeating those 2 sentences and like I would not shut up, and it was just amazing.
And your doctor, the one you had there, had delivered both, right?
No, Dr. Steer is my obstetrician, and he was the one who delivered Annarose, but the doctor who actually was a midwife who delivered Rosa, and that was over at Children's Hospital, Philadelphia.
Oh, right, because you were in CHOP.
Yeah,
right.
So, and I mean, they were wonderful, but I remember we went back into the consultation with one of the MFM doctors there that we really liked, and
which is maternal fetal medicine, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it was Dr. Moldenhauer, and I remember they just wanted to help us in any way going forward, so that way we could go into the transfer with, you know, the most confidence that we had. And I remember when we were leaving, we said, we hope we never have to see you again. And she knew exactly what we meant, you know, which just that, not that nothing against you. You're the best doctors in the world. But if we're here, then that means that we have a scary reason to be here. And we just hope that we never have to see you again. And she was like, right on. We agree.
And so like all the, so there's the doctor who's delivering, and then there's the nurse, the one nurse, and John, right, in the room for the most part?
Yes.
And so are they're all aware of the story, everything that's going on, right?
Yes, my OB knew what was going on, and it was kind of, I mean, I was in the, you know, varying degrees of pain throughout the day, and so there's a shift change with the nurses who are coming in and coming out. And so I remember with the one shift, I was in a lot of pain, so I really didn't get a chance to explain the story. I'm the first nurse who came in. I'm like, you know, I'm always like, I must tell my story. Yeah. You know, you must know that this child existed.
This will outdo Grey's Anatomy right here.
I was like, I have to let them know, because it's just, you know, I remember when we were leaving the hospital, and John went out to go get the car seat, and I was with the nurse, and I hadn't told the nurse about the stillbirth. This is one person. I was just exhausted, and I just hadn't. I hadn't had the chance to tell her what was going on. She was the one who slipped through the cracks. And so, anyway, we're giving Annarose a bath, and the next thing that was going to happen is that I was going to dress her, and we were going to put her in the car seat, and we were going to bring her home. And I was like realizing this and getting very emotional, because it was just like, we're taking this one home, and.
Because you had the 2 days with both in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the last time we had to say goodbye, and it was absolutely the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And this time around, she was coming home with us, and I started crying, and like, because the nurse, after we finished the bath, she handed her to me so I could dress her, and I was just holding her and crying, and just so overwhelmed with like every emotion that you could possibly imagine. And then John walks in the room, and he sees me crying and like clinging to the baby, and I could see that he was like, what's wrong? Like he all of a sudden went back. into that like panic mode.
Well, he's got that there. He's got the compartmentalized, right? Because
Exactly.
he's fatalistic a little bit. There's a part of that's there, and you just,
And here I am thinking, oh gosh, I'm triggering him. And I have to explain to him like what's going on. And I didn't even have to say 2 words. I just said, she's fine. And he was like, he understood.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible moment. I really can't put words to it, but we're, I remember with Rosa, they, typically they have you go out in a wheelchair because you just gave birth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you sit in the wheelchair and they wheel you out. And I convinced them that I didn't need the wheelchair. I didn't want the wheelchair because I just felt like, I don't know. I felt like if I don't get to bring my baby home with me, I don't want to be treated in that moment. I didn't want to be treated like someone who just had a baby.
right.
If that makes any sense. But this time around, I'm in the wheelchair and I'm holding my baby and they're,
Did you have like momentary flashbulb memories of both things happening? Because there's so many of the same processes, obviously, that do happen, like the wheelchair thing or like that. And is it like just like pops in?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that is true of pretty much every day, I mean, things will happen and it's a little bit, I guess, easier to forget now. Not forget, but like
it just each day puts sand on top of the
and
memory.
like, so I'll catch myself doing something with Annarose and then I'll realize I never got to do this with Rosa or Robin. And, it makes me feel sad for that loss, but at the same time, I feel so grateful that I get to do that with Annarose. And we are, very creative in the way that we integrate Annarose with her angel siblings. And I know that she's going to grow up knowing about them. I mean, there's no way that she could miss we have a display wall in our house where we have Rosa's picture. And, like we had made up a nursery and she had things. And so when we were getting ready for Annarose, we had to move Rosa's things out of the nursery and move Annarose in there. And, what do you do with all of that, So we decided to pack up some of the things in a memory box, but then also I wanted to display certain things. So it's kind of nice. We have this extra bedroom in the house that we call the reading room, and it has our little glider chair. And so Annarose and I will go in there and we'll nurse, or we also have all of her books in there. And so I can read a book to Annarose, and while I'm reading to Annarose, there's a picture of Rosa. And we have this beautiful display wall of Rosa and Robin's name that we had made for over the crib. And so I feel like in that moment, I'm spending it with all 3 of them. And it's like story time for all of the babies, So to me, that brings me peace. And it helps me to it's sad in one way that the relationship is not what you would want for Annarose to have with Rosa and Robin. But at the same time, this is as good as it gets. And so we're going to make the most of it. And that's just my way of doing things.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like we said, they're all in the same group. So they're kind of all twins in a way. They're all sharing much of the same time.
Exactly.
Of conception.
They all knew each other once in that petri dish. So,
So I'm intrigued by the part where it's like you gain this maybe part of yourself back that you maybe had lost, or just, I mean, you literally probably had depression, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so glad you bring that up, because honestly, like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety,
and then straight up depression. Straight up depression.
Well, those
on top
are things
of it, right?
that are talked about very often. And honestly, I remember reading that people who go through infertility or a loss are predisposed to postpartum depression, they have a higher chance of actually being diagnosed with it, and just in depression in general and anxiety in general. Because I would say that the years that I spent doing IVF before Rosa and Robin and everybody was conceived, I was probably working towards like trying to fight my way through depression,
Sure.
And I was kind of getting myself into a little hole, but I felt like if I could just get pregnant, that would solve the problem and I'll be all better.
Right.
And then I had the whole experience with Rosa and Robin, and it really, like you said, I lost a piece of myself. And on top of the grief of that loss, there's the hormones from going through the birthing process. Like
that's expecting a baby.
Exactly.
Right?
Like my body, as far as my body knows, I had a baby. So all of the hormones, everything's going to happen like I had a baby. And so it was definitely tough. And it was a lot of times people will focus on the depression with postpartum depression. But for me, it was more the anxiety. I had postpartum anxiety, which is kind of under the same umbrella. But instead of always, having that depressive state of mind, I was just hypervigilant and so anxious that it was at times hard to function. But through all of the work that I did with like healing projects, anyone who's ever gone through a loss may know of, like a pregnancy loss, may know of Carly Marie. She does these healing projects, and she has a huge following of people who have lost babies in pregnancy and infant loss. And her claim to fame is that she has Christian speech, and she had a stillborn son, and she happens to live in Australia near this beach that's just beautiful. And so she'll go out and write the angel babies' names in the sand, and then take these amazing sunset pictures. So it's really beautiful. And she'll, with the name of the baby, she'll also sometimes add flowers and things to make it really special. So there's a lot of people who follow her, and she has these healing projects that she does throughout the year. And so for example, there's one called Capture Your Grief, where you take a picture every day for the month. And it's every day's theme is to help you work through, whatever part of that grief, like telling their story or their name. And every day there's a different theme. So I had done a lot of those healing projects, and, I have my own process of how I healed. And I do feel like by working through the grief in my own way and in finding good support groups and just amazing family and friends to help support me through, awesome doctors and nurses, I really did find that piece of myself that I lost. And I'm not the same person who I was, but at the same time I am still my character is still there, but at the same time I just went through this it's a huge life change,
For many, our first one of these was 3 years ago, and you had been through the process for a couple of years at that point, right? Because 2014 was when we did the first one, but there was enough stories there and a reason to do that one in recognition of National Infertility Awareness Week. That 5-6 year process? So
we started trying to conceive, not preventing, in September of 2011.
Okay. So yes. So that's coming up on 6. Wait.
Yeah.
It's coming
in
up
September.
On 6 years.
It would be 6 years. I would say we got really serious though about trying to conceive in June of 2012. That's when we got serious with using the ovulation predictor kits and all of that stuff, and then realized that there were problems and this should have probably happened by now. Maybe we need help from a doctor. We started working with a doctor in April of 2013. And then we saw you for the first podcast in April of 2014. So it was a full year with the doctors at that point. And man, so much has happened every year, especially this past year. So
2 more things, psychological still.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll end with the hyper positive one. Not that this one's negative, but I'm just interested in this. So you were almost like, if you were an online person, your avatar, you were like an amazing advocate for infertility and loss and all that, and you still are. Is there almost as weird as it is to say, is there almost like a slight guilt you feel when, not a guilt in having a baby, but in having one, and then you think of the
people who
still have losses, although you probably saw many of those
mm-hmm.
before over the years who move on and have babies. I'm just interested in that part.
Yes. All right. So it's hard to explain, but I will try. Yes, you do feel, I think it's very common for
it's like survivor's guilt
for women. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's survivor's guilt. You feel guilty about you want everybody to come over to the other side with you, but at the same time, I honestly felt there was a chunk of time where I honestly felt like I was going to be the one who, because not every person who wants to have a baby does eventually have a baby. You could go through all of this and still end up without a baby. So I had convinced myself that that could be my reality, you know? So, not to say that helped me to not feel good. I guess it just helped me to acknowledge that, yes, there's that feeling of guilt, but it's okay to feel happy for myself in this moment because I went through a lot. I really, really, really thought that it wasn't going to work out. And here it is working out. And I am so hopeful. I still follow so many friends who are trying, and I pray for them, and I really do think of them. I mean, I always tell them, I have you in my thought and my prayers, and I really do.
Well, and probably you stand as a positive avatar to go towards. You went through as much as most of these people can go through. But
at the same time, I understand and recognize that sometimes even those stories of hope, like I remember seeing all of these success stories, and sometimes, yes, I am so happy for them, especially when you know how much they struggled. Yeah. I'm very happy for you, but at the same time, I am so sad for me. I can't.
Sure. And they almost can't be in the group anymore in some ways because it's sort of like they can mean the world and mean everything positive, but once they've graduated to that, they almost...
It's a triggering thing. It's triggering. And I recognize, because I still do, like I said, I follow certain other families, and I'm really hoping that they get to have their rainbow baby, or they get to have the baby even without a loss. There are some people who just haven't been pregnant yet, and I hope they never have to go through a loss, and I just hope that they get to have their baby immediately. Let's do this now. But I just lost my train of thought. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I understand and recognize that I could be triggering. As much as they know my story, I could still be that trigger. And so I try to be very respectful and just... Maybe
be an observer.
Exactly.
And be there to support, be a like, but maybe not be a lecturer.
I'm a cheerleader for them. And I'm a shoulder for them. And I'm an ear for them 1,000%. Anytime I will,
It's like a cheerleader, not a coach.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And like as if I would know, like even though I went through and we have this amazing little baby, I don't know how to make it happen for everybody, so it's just I feel like my role is just to be supportive. And I very often reach out and say, I'm thinking of you. And that's it. And if they want to continue the conversation, then I am right there. And I'm, I want to cheer them on and support them in any way that I can. But at the same time, if it's too much and too triggering for them, then I totally understand. And I will, I'll be there. Yeah. I'll be there when they need me, basically.
And the last thing, so when you go through the whole process coming up on 6 years, you lose pieces of yourself, you go through all these different tunnels of grief, depression, all this. Isn't it fascinating when you have a baby that you actually become another person immediately, right? Like you can't imagine, no matter how much you think about it or try, you can't imagine what it is to be a parent. And then when you're one, it's like passing over to what people say maybe heaven is. Like it's something you never could have conceived of. Mm-hmm. And it changes your being yet again.
Isn't that funny, the way that you put that? And I remember almost like bargaining before, like while I was dealing with all the infertility. I remember bargaining, saying like, oh, I won't complain. Like, right. No matter how hard parenting is, I'm not going to complain, and I'm going to just treasure every single moment.
Absolutely right.
And then you have the baby, and there are really, really hard moments where it's just, not complaining, but it's just hard.
No, you reach a point. We're all humans. We're not computers or robots. You reach a point where you go, oh my God, as much as I want this, I'm still sitting here at 3 a.m. with something screaming at me, and I can't figure out what is going on. And I'm still a human who's like,
yeah, exactly.
It's hard.
Yeah, there's definitely moments where like the sleep deprivation can really fuel all of that.
It's torture in many places, sleep deprivation.
Yeah. But I guess, what was the original question?
That you become a person that you never even, no matter how much you can think about what it is, when you become it, you are a changed person. There are times, and you get this. I don't know if you've had this early on, if you and John have had the chance to be on your own for a night or even overnight or to go out. But when you go on those, mm-hmm. you're just like, I don't even know who we are anymore. And you just end up talking about the child, and you're doing fun stuff, but you're always tethered to the idea of, not that you can't have an amazing time. You're having an amazing time, but you're like, I'm different. I'm like, I look the same, but I'm different.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely true in that, like, for example, I try to schedule a little bit of time every day to take care of just me, and like whether it's just meditation. And yesterday I went to yoga, and that was supposed to be my me time. And so I step out of the house, I leave a bottle for the baby. So that way, if she wakes up, and she'll be taken care of, and my husband won't be, scrambling. But the whole time I'm at this yoga class.
He didn't bring her into the yoga class, did he?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But the whole time I'm there, I'm trying to just focus on my breath and just focus on the poses and just be in the moment. All I could think about was that little stinker.
Yeah, the whole time.
It totally changes everything. But at the same time, I think the whole experience of infertility, of the loss, and then of having a living baby, every single step, I kind of like changed.
Yeah.
So I'm not the same person from like each podcast. You could be like, hey, this is totally different guest
We will
here.
set this up so someone can listen. We'll set up a channel. You listen. It's like the Star Wars order that you're supposed to, or Star Wars, the machete order, where it's like you got to watch 2 first.
Yes.
1. You listen from 1 until this one.
Yeah.
And you just get like, oh, that would actually be an interesting idea.
Like a series?
Yeah, to just do like an autoplay.
I want like dramatic music, like the,
right.
with the da, da, da,
yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that would be funny.
That would be fun. But yeah, no, as far as, you're a totally different person, but at the same time, I do feel it important to say that I'm still infertile, A lot of times people think, oh, these people are going through this infertility battle and now they have a baby. Everything's got to be completely better. And I don't want to say that like things are a lot better when you actually have the baby.
Sure.
That's totally true. But you still have like it just changes who you are and the way that you look at things. And, it's still sometimes can be a little bit tough when there's another person who announces a pregnancy. Even though I'm like I'm reading about this or I'm learning about this and I'm seeing it on Facebook and I'm holding my baby. So it's like, but why do I still have this combination of feelings, because there's still that underlying tone that if we wanted to have another baby, it will be very complicated to try to have another baby, Well,
I'm fascinated by, there's one couple we know. They had twins through IVF, and then I feel like maybe it was months later, maybe it was a year. You get so lost in time. I mean, we did this 3 years ago and we did it 1 year. I don't know, but whatever it was. But they had we're pregnant. So they had the infertility issues. They had twins. And then sometimes I think you're in the clear, or maybe you're in a good state of mind where you go, this isn't going to happen, so it happens.
Yeah.
We think so hard about it that it won't happen. I also believe that there's something to, and I could sound like an oaf who's dumb right now, but I think there's something to almost priming the body to be to have embryos transferred into it, all the things that have to be done from the shots and creating this almost potentially, I don't want to call it artificial, but creating this perfect like birth circumstance.
Yeah.
That
it's like it teaches the body.
Maybe when you come out of it, you're like super womb. You know, and like because they ended up with an Irish. Well, they already had the twins. They ended up with an Irish triplet.
Oh my
in some
gosh!
ways, you know what I mean?
Oh wow!
So they had the new one, and then the other part that I'm always interested in. I'm like, well, oh man, they got banked embryos, and they just had one naturally, which is great.
Yeah,
but it's like
then that's something to think about. You know,
it's crazy. It's just that is crazy to me, and I've heard that more than a couple of times. I've heard that happen. Where
it is actually pretty common for that spontaneous pregnancy to happen after, and a lot of times I know of women in the support groups that I participate in who they are that story where they go through so much and then finally they have their baby through either adoption or they have it through IVF or even embryo adoption or whatever the case may be. And then months later they have that spontaneous pregnancy. And it's pretty common.
There's got to be something in the head or in the psychology where you just something changes, because there is a lot that can be psychosomatic. Not in the majority of cases at all. I'm not saying that, but there's something, whether it's sports or whether it's someone getting through a hurdle or someone getting through something where they can think themselves out of things, and maybe when circumstances change that give them what they wanted, there's something that I don't know. Yeah,
I know that a lot of the ladies who have gone through that particular experience will express almost a feeling of guilt that they had this spontaneous pregnancy, because there is one of the misconceptions with infertility is that, and one of the horrible things that people will say to you is, well, if you just go relax, go on vacation, and then it'll happen. And
just drink.
Exactly. Like once you stop thinking about it, it's going to happen. And so a lot of times they think like, oh my gosh, like I'm perpetuating that.
Oh yeah,
that
it makes
myth.
it worse. Yeah.
But
it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
In my mind, I kind of think of it as like almost like the body is awakened by the whole medicine, and that it's like, oh, okay, now I know what to do. And also it's just we have no control. I mean, we sit here and we do everything we can with the doctors, and we try our very best, but in the end, what's going to be is going to be. And for some couples, that's just the way that it happens, is that they have their IVF baby and then they also have their spontaneous pregnancy. I cannot imagine having Irish triplets. That just, wow. There's not enough coffee in the world.
When I was thinking about the husband, I love the husband. He's a good guy. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah. But
whoa.
Hey.
The more the merrier, I guess.
Well, and honestly, a lot of times, it's funny because you have a baby and then you go for your postpartum visit and the doctor talks to you about birth control options.
Yes.
And my doctor brought that up and said, okay, so let's talk about birth control. And I said, really? With the extent of infertility that we have going on here, is that something that we really have to worry about? And we both just started cracking up laughing. And that we were just having this conversation. But, it can happen. And I just, wow. It would be overwhelming. But at the same time, if there was some God-given miracle where all of a sudden I found myself pregnant at this moment, having a not even 3-month-old baby, I don't even think it could be possible. I guess it could be possible. That's how Irish twins, are conceived.
Yeah.
But
God's like, you want it, you got it.
If that were to happen, then I think John and I, we actually talked about it. We were like, we would be very accepting.
Oh,
we would say, this is what's supposed to happen and this is just the way that it's supposed to be. Our arms are wide open. But wow, I bowed down.
I know.
Bowed down to parents of multiples, and I bow down to parents of, 2 under 2 or 3 under 3. Oh my goodness. It's just, wow.
Poor Ireland getting hit with that brush.
Aw.
But, well, we said we weren't going to go long today, but it was a good long. And I think John added to it.
Yes,
so it's
he
a whole,
did.
you're going to have fun listening to it because you didn't even,
I know.
you don't know what he really talked about. And then he comes down and he's like, I talked about a religion. I talked about all this. I talked about crying. So I felt like it was one of those, I was like the therapist.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm going to meet with the husband first and you're going to come down. We're going to have a together session.
That's funny.
And then just you. And
yeah, I
everyone can
actually
hear.
opened up the door at first, and I heard this like a very deep conversation
Somber,
going on.
Real, yeah.
And I was going to hand the baby to him and be like, by the way, she's loaded. She needs a diaper change. But then I heard that and I was like, oh, I'm just going to, I handled the diaper change so you can continue.
Yeah, I don't think he was planning on being on. So that was interesting. And it showed you the reality of children.
Yeah.
Sometimes nature calls and dad needs to step in when he wasn't ready. And
that's
it all worked out. So
yeah.
I think if there's anything else left to be said, I think it was good. We have our rainbow episode.
Yes, my beautiful rainbow.
And as always, thank you for telling your story.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. As always, it's just a pleasure chatting with you, and it's so cool to be a part of your podcast show.
The nice 3-part series with the great ending.